All right, everybody, welcome into another episode of Stadium Seat Sports. As always, I'm Coop here with my partner and co-host Kriv. And in this video, Kriv, we're gonna jump into a little bit of breaking news here. Broke a few hours earlier, and that's going to be Bill Belichick going to be the next head coach, replacing Mac Brown at the University of Carolina. So I think that's some pretty staggering news there. So we'll just briefly touch on that, give our thoughts on that, how we think it's going to work, and then we'll go into the college football playoff bracket. We're not going to give picks in these games. We're going to save that for a later date. We will go through each matchup and give picks. We're just going to give our general thoughts on the way that the bracket's laid out here, and then maybe briefly touch base on all of the games, but not do picks quite yet. And like I said, we're going to save that for another video. So I'll throw it over to you here, honestly, because I'm excited to hear your thoughts on Bill Belichick going to the University of North Carolina. It's something that I can truly tell you I never thought would ever happen. So I think we're
Yeah.
probably in the same boat there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we heard rumors the last like week or so of the possibility, but I don't think anyone took that seriously at all. I
Mhm.
mean, this guy was he is arguably the greatest coach in NFL history.
Sure.
And I mean, six-time Super Bowl champ, countless Super Bowl appearances. Just a incredible resume.
Yeah.
And to hear that name as head coach for North Carolina
Right. Of all
of all
schools.
schools, yeah,
Right. Yeah.
it's quite honestly baffling. And but at the same time, I'm super excited about it.
Sure.
So I know some of the details are coming out. I think they said 3 years, 30 million.
Mhm.
He had a 400 page, I guess you could call it a manifesto of how he wanted to handle this. And essentially, my understanding is his pitch to the trustees at North Carolina was this is going to be an NFL factory for players. If you
Mhm.
want to go to the NFL, he's going to get you ready. So that's unique in the sense that, of course, that's everyone's goal, but this is
Right.
the guy.
Right.
Um,
And I think it's
so
it's it's North Carolina too, right? Like when you're thinking about NFL factories from a collegiate standpoint, you think of Alabama, you think of Ohio State, historically
yeah,
you think of USC, Notre Dame. You don't think of the University of North Carolina. But now with Bill Belichick there, who knows more about the NFL and how to succeed in the NFL than anyone at the collegiate level at this point in time, that comes to my mind. Like we could be talking about North Carolina in that same sphere of the teams that I just mentioned.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's pretty wild, and I'm very interested to see how this plays out because he truly does view this in a unique way in the sense that this is not the college football that we grew up with.
Sure.
NIL has changed everything, number one. Transfer portal has changed everything. It's essentially a free agency.
Yep.
And I mean, Bill Belichick sees that and he's like, this is not your recruiting visits and all that. He probably will do minimal recruiting visits.
Mhm.
I've heard that Steve Belichick, his son, is going to join him and kind of be leading the charge on a lot of that other stuff, that
Yeah.
day-to-day head coach type stuff.
I
And
think that makes
apparently,
sense.
and I heard he might be the coach in waiting as well. So this is all, of course, rumor, but it does make
Sure.
sense.
I mean, it's all
Uh,
very fresh, but it makes sense.
they're gonna run this like a NFL operation. I mean, say what you want about Bill Belichick's success without Tom Brady.
Mhm.
Um, he had a lot of success before the Patriots.
Yeah.
So I mean, that debate can be pushed to the side here. This is incredibly unique, and
Mhm.
it's going to be a real case study for the future of the sport.
Yeah.
Because if this works and they operate like an NFL franchise or whatever this looks like, it's going to change how every school operates.
Sure.
And you're going to see guys who you never would imagine being college coaches, and they're going
Mhm.
to try the same thing. And I hate to go away from this a little bit, but you've heard Mike Vrabel in the past say he would never do coach college because of all the other stuff that's involved. But
Right.
I think Bill Belichick sees it in a way that that's not the case. And someone like Vrabel, who shied away from this, might not
Mhm.
do that anymore
I mean,
because
listen. Yeah, look, we talked about it. Like we've talked about it off air, but like in the NIL era, we've gotten more and more away from the collegiate initial style of recruiting, of just overall viewership in terms of like how we view the sport. And it's become more NFL like. So I think that that also pushed Bill Belichick to even consider coming to college because I think even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, Bill Belichick probably wouldn't even have considered this. Granted, obviously he was still with the Patriots at that point in time, but like take that out of
Yeah.
it. Like we are seeing college develop with free agency, like you said, with NIL. Like we're seeing college become essentially an NFL light, and it might just be, literally the next stepping stone to the NFL in terms of how it's viewed, players getting paid, free agency players going to different schools year in and year out if they're not getting enough, play time, if they think
Yeah.
they can have more success elsewhere. Like we're seeing a bigger NFL model enter the college sphere, which I think probably ultimately gave Bill Belichick the, you know, little nudge, if you want to say, to potentially give this a shot.
I think for him too, it is such a unique challenge and it's
Mm-hmm.
something he has never done. And
Yeah,
I mean, he has accomplished everything you could ever want to accomplish in the
sure,
NFL. So
sure.
as shocking as it seems on the surface, what do you do if you've done everything already? And
Right.
this is it. I mean, this is uncharted waters.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I'm excited for it. I want to see
Yeah,
what
I
this
am
leads
too.
to. It's gonna re it could reshape college football.
Yeah,
So I
it
mean,
really could.
and college football changes all the time, and the
Mm-hmm.
changes, like you said, that have happened the last 3 4 years with NIL, transfer portal rules, all of that, even COVID rules. I mean, things change so much
Mm-hmm.
that it's opened the door of possibilities for what can happen in this sport, and
For sure.
it's never gonna be the same. But
No, it's
um,
not, but it's
I,
exciting. It's
yeah,
exciting.
and I do want to throw this out here. I saw a report right before we hopped on air here, and apparently Bill Belichick, part of his like agreement to do this was UNC NIL fundraising, essentially
Mm-hmm.
agreed to allocate they last season I think they had like 4 million towards the team.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're saying up to 20 million, which is on
Yeah,
par with the top of the sport. So
yeah. I mean, that's on
Bill
par with what
Belichick,
Ohio State has this year.
exactly, and Bill Belichick with what's considered the top of the sport for NIL. I mean, anything can happen. The transfer
Sure.
portal is absolutely loaded right now. I wouldn't be shocked to see more people go into the transfer portal for the chance to play for Bill Belichick. And
Yeah.
he is not a player's coach, but he
Mm-hmm.
is going to maximize your talent. He's going to put them in a position to win.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting to see how he resonates with them because you've heard the stories of rookie Rob Gronkowski doing ridiculous things and having to
Yeah.
deal Bill Belichick having to deal with it. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, if Bill Belichick can deal with a rookie Rob Gronkowski, I mean,
Yeah. I
he
think
can
you can
deal with
deal with
most
pretty much
kids.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
So I
mean,
mean,
listen, like, and no one, like, he knows how to get these guys ready for the next level. And ultimately, that's what these players want, right? Like, they want the opportunity to go prove themselves on Sundays and play in the National Football League. Like, that's what they want. And I think that Bill Belichick, even if he doesn't have a heavy hand in recruiting, is ultimately going to have a lot of success because players are going to look at that, whether it's transferring into UNC,
yeah.
whether it's coming out of high school to UNC, and they're going to be like, this guy knows what it takes to succeed at the next level. And that is my ultimate goal. I think everyone that comes in to play football at the collegiate level, whether or not they're going to make it to the NFL, is a moot point. Like their goal is to make it to the NFL and play on Sundays. So if you can learn under a great like Bill Belichick, I think that that's a huge selling point for UNC and that football program. And we're going to see, right? Because you have the greatest college football coach of all time in Nick Saban, right? He had an NFL stint with the Miami Dolphins. Didn't go that well, not anywhere close to what he had success wise in
Yeah.
at the collegiate level. We're going to see because Bill Belichick, like you said, you would find, a lot of people hard pressed to pick another NFL head coach historically that has had as much success as Bill Belichick at the NFL level. Is that going to translate to the collegiate level? It'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see as like a somewhat of like a little bit of a case study because we saw it with Nick Saban, the GOAT collegiate coach, go to the NFL, not have that much success, but we know how amazing he was at the collegiate level. Same thing with Bill Belichick. Go to the NFL level. Let's see, are we going to see, similar lack of success at the collegiate level for him, or will he have success at the collegiate level? I a little bit, and it's a wait and see game. I lean more towards Bill Belichick will have success. I think the collegiate level is becoming NFL light. But with that being said, I think the jump from college to the NFL is bigger than the jump from the NFL to college. I think that if you've had success at the NFL level, you can figure out how to have success at the collegiate level. It might not be immediately for Bill Belichick, but I think that the transition will be a little bit softer than it would
Yeah.
be college to NFL.
And just one more point here. I think one of the things to keep an eye on here is the staff he's going to put together. I know I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned his son, who of course was an NFL coordinator. I mean, you can say, yeah, it was nepotism, whatever, but his son still, I mean, has NFL experience.
Right.
I believe he is technically at Washington right now, but I can't imagine he stays there over being with his dad.
Yeah, I think he
But
ultimately would come to
I
UNC.
I also have to think the staff is going to be made up mostly of NFL guys.
Mm-hmm.
And there is just you've seen it before where certain NFL staffers end up back in the college ranks and they tend to excel just
Mm-hmm.
because technically a step down. So a lot of
Sure.
these coaches, there's a lot of college coaches who hope to make it to the NFL one day, and then these NFL guys coming, their schemes, their designs, their game plans are so detailed and impactful at the college level. So I'll keep an eye on this staff. Obviously, Bill Belichick can make a game plan himself, but if he brings in the NFL staff, I mean, I just want to see how it plays out. It's going to be
Yeah.
super interesting, and it could be something to behold.
Yeah.
But
I fully agree. And like we'll move on from this, but like I would have thought Nick Saban comes out of retirement to coach college again before we ever saw Bill
yeah,
Belichick
yeah.
coaching a college team. And obviously that's not the case. I literally never would have thought that we'd see the day. So I'm super super excited to see how this plays out. Like you said, I think it's a great point seeing what staff he puts together. But ultimately, I think this is a huge home run hire for UNC, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. And so with that conversation, Bella's making her second appearance
Mhm.
ever on the podcast here. Um, with that conversation out of the way, obviously we touched on that a little bit. Just going to jump into hello. We're going to jump into the college football playoff bracket. Just give you our thoughts on the seeding because I think that the seeding is very very important here. Like we were both watching this show and texting back and forth about who's got an easier path. And so we'll jump into that. We'll give you a little thoughts on the matchups here, but again, not going to go too into detail. Not going to give pick'ems. We'll do that at a later date with a different video. But the first thought I wanted to just throw out here, and I feel like you probably feel this way as well, is Oregon, most consistent team throughout the regular season. Obviously, they had the early struggles in the first 2-3 weeks of the season. Most consistent team, 13-0, Big Ten champions in their first year in the Big Ten. Obviously, they draw the number one seed. They were the most consistent and dominant team all year long. And arguably, you can say, I don't even know if it's arguably, they had the hardest path of any team. And that was their reward for going 13-0.
I'll say they have the hardest path of any team who got a automatic bye.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
because
You could make an argument Tennessee and Ohio State have the hardest path because they have
yeah,
to go through Oregon and then likely Texas.
and themselves. So
Sure.
um,
Sure.
so yeah, but I do agree. So I think there's a few clear winners. Well, yeah, a few clear winners and obviously one clear loser, and that loser is Oregon. And by no means, I think everything's in front of Oregon. Like it doesn't matter that they have the toughest road. It just doesn't
Sure.
make sense that they do. And I think
100%.
yeah, and I think it's pretty obvious on paper in the off season, the format made sense. And then you have your Arizona States, your Boise States that because of the bids and the automatic buys for conference winners, it completely screwed this bracket up.
Sure.
And in my opinion, number one is automatic bid for conference championship. That's fine. That makes
Mm,
sense. Same thing as college basketball. You can find your way in by winning that. That's perfectly fine.
Sure.
The automatic, the automatic bye week, and no, that makes no sense. It
Hmm.
should just be rankings.
Yep.
You get your seeds, you go from there. And even honestly, even if it was like it is today and you keep everything static, it would make sense to reseed after uh, after the first round. So
Fully agree.
Oregon shouldn't have to play Ohio State or Tennessee. They should play, let's just say SMU or Indiana somehow wins.
Right.
That should be their matchup.
For sure.
Um,
I think that they've earned that. I think we're in agreement there, right?
yeah.
Like it's fine to have Ohio State versus Tennessee right now, and it looks like Oregon's going to play them, but I think 100% you're correct. Like you should reseed after that. And it's not that Oregon's trying to duck anybody. Like Oregon's been the best, most consistent team all year long throughout the regular season, 13-0. Like that proves that. Like they have earned that number one spot. But your reward for earning that number one spot is a matchup with either Ohio State or Tennessee. Like that is far more difficult than a matchup potentially with Arizona State, Boise State, or not Boise State, excuse me, Arizona State, SMU, even Notre Dame. They've been playing better football as of late. Like Texas, like we know what Texas can be, but Texas hasn't looked like the dominant team that maybe a lot of us expected to see. And granted, Ohio State lost that super ugly game to Michigan at the end of the year, so we're wary on Ohio State right now. But the talent that Ohio State has, and Iamalieva for Tennessee, and what they bring with that defensive front and their run game, like Tennessee is a very dangerous team too. So to get rewarded with one of those two teams is it's brutal for the number one seed.
Yeah, and I think another point here that so my issue is also with how the committee picked their teams. I mean, I agree with the
Sure.
12 that made it. I do.
Yeah. I'm glad SMU earned a spot in this.
Yeah,
And that's no shot at Alabama, but SMU earned that spot in there.
as SMU was in and they lost their conference game by a crazy long field goal at the
Hmm.
with time expiring. That would be a horrendous way to miss it. And
Sure.
honestly, I know Bama fans are upset. You lost three games.
Hmm.
Obviously, the last one being Oklahoma, 24-3. I mean that loss was brutal.
Yeah. I think if they lost on a last second field goal, I think Alabama probably makes it over
Yeah,
SMU,
that loss.
even with SMU losing on a last second field goal.
Yeah, so that loss was probably just too much to overcome.
Hmm.
Yeah, and but going back to the seeding, the things that stand out to me, Texas at 5. I mean,
Hmm.
don't get me wrong, Texas lost two games and they lost to the SEC champs twice. Once a blowout, once in overtime to a backup quarterback.
Hmm.
Uh, but
Is it
they
just
did.
me? Like, well, and we'll touch on it. Like, Georgia looked better with the backup quarterback in there.
They
Like,
they they seemed a little more dynamic,
yeah.
but
And they just seem to have an energy that they've lacked this year with Carson back. Like, I don't know what it is, but
yeah,
like they were fired up.
yeah, and we'll get more into that in our preview. But yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. There did seem to be a spark there, and if it's a one-time spark or if it's a real thing, we'll find out. But
Sure.
for
Because we
me,
don't know the extent of Carson Beck's injury, right? Like, I've not seen
they
anything. Have you
they said
seen?
they say he's not likely to play in the Sugar Bowl, and it's a
And that's
UCL.
with them having a bye.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and it's a UCL injury. So
okay.
we'll see what happens there. But
Hmm.
for me, Texas, they have no ranked wins. Of course, they beat teams while they are ranked, but no one on their schedule is ranked as of today that they beat.
Sure.
They lost to the same team twice, won a blowout at home and won in the SEC championship to a backup.
Hmm.
So I feel like 5 was a bit aggressive for them.
I don't disagree.
The resume wasn't there, and they didn't beat anyone that was ranked, and
Mhm.
that's just the way it works. And then you go to Penn.
Well, let me
Sorry, go
ask
ahead.
you really quickly before you go to Penn State. Do you think, because obviously Ohio State's sitting there, they have to face Tennessee. So obviously they had Penn, and we'll get into this in a second. They had Penn State above Ohio State, even though Ohio State had the head to head. If Ohio State had beaten Michigan, that would be the common opponent between them and Texas. And Ohio State would have two top five wins. Texas has none. do you think Ohio State would have been above Texas? Like, do you think that was the differentiator, or do you just think Texas played in the SEC championship game, lost a very close game, so they gave them the benefit of the doubt? Like, I'm trying to figure out what the
Yeah,
differentiator
well,
there was.
if Ohio State had beaten Michigan and then went to the conference championship
Correct.
and then lost to Oregon, so they both would have lost to the same teams twice.
Yeah.
Oregon, of course, being the better loss technically
Right.
because one, Ohio State lost by one at Oregon, and then we
Hmm.
don't know how the Big Ten championship game would have played out, but I'd imagine it would have been relatively close based on how
Sure.
Penn State performed. I think Ohio State would easily beat the five
Yeah.
over
Because
Texas.
they had the ranked wins that Texas wouldn't have.
Yeah, I think that
And
would
they would
settle
both
it
have
up.
that 13th data point, like you said, would both have two losses and both losses to the same team in terms of Ohio State losing to Oregon twice, Texas losing to Georgia twice.
Yeah, and then the other thing here, going back to Penn State,
Mm-hmm.
similar to Texas, uh, Penn State lost their two biggest games of the year.
Yep.
They lost to Ohio State at home. They lost to Oregon. I thought
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they put up a much bigger fight than I think a lot of people were
Yeah,
expecting.
they listen. They Oregon gave them their best shot, and it looked like Penn State was falling behind. Penn State
They kept coming back.
hung with Oregon.
Yeah,
Like
so,
they fought hard.
yeah. So I credit them for that. It's a tough one because Penn State obviously had to play an extra game than
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State. So you have that factor, but they lost their head-to-head to Ohio State. Their only ranked win on the year was Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
who I'm assuming they're still ranked today. I didn't check,
Yeah,
but
I believe they were like
um,
23, 24, 20.
yeah,
Like they were
yeah,
at the bottom, but I believe they were
yeah.
ranked.
So honestly, once again, resume is not that strong. No big wins.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to Notre Dame, very similar. I think their biggest win was like Army when they were ranked.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Army was
Um,
undefeated at that point in
they
time. Notre
lost.
Dame waxed them.
Notre Dame definitely has the worst loss of
Mm-hmm.
these top few seeds against NIU. So, I mean, the committee pretty much laid out that your schedule does not matter. If you have big wins, that's fine, but we'd rather you have no losses against bad teams. So
Sure.
um, I think honestly, it sounds crazy, and Ohio State did it to themselves
Sure.
because
And neither one of like you or I are playing the small violin here for Ohio
yeah,
State. Like
yeah.
they had every opportunity to find themselves as a top four seed or bare minimum, like the fifth,
Well,
maybe sixth, and
well,
they blew it.
they weren't gonna get a top four seed because they have to win a conference,
Well, that's what I'm saying. But if they
but
beat
yeah,
Michigan, they would have had an opportunity to beat Oregon.
but
Like
but
where
but
they fell is entirely on them.
my point being is even with the two losses, you could argue with their resume and their wins and their strength of schedule
Sure.
that they were more deserving of all the way up to the five seed.
Sure.
And
You can make that argument. And
but
I
but
think if that ugly loss had taken place middle of the season, beginning of the season, they
completely
might be
different.
sitting there at the
Yeah,
five
yeah.
seed.
That
But it
was
happened last week of the year. That's the last data point the committee has of Ohio State
yeah,
right now.
and that's how they're gonna address the current state of your team. And
Sure.
honestly, five through five through eight, I mean, you could argue any of those teams could be mixed up anywhere.
Sure.
But the other problem, like we talked about, is the clear winners and losers of this. And the clearest winner to me is of course Penn State.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't disagree with that. I think Penn State is the biggest winner of all of this.
and I want to say this is going to be a real test because James
Even
Frank.
Georgia, you could make her Georgia too, like truthfully.
Yeah, I mean,
Granted, Notre Dame could be tough if Notre Dame wins,
Notre
but
Dame has a good defense, and Georgia has a backup quarterback, and I mean Georgia has looked vulnerable a lot of the year, so who knows?
sure. Sure.
Um, but for Penn State, we'll see if James Franklin can technically win a big game. I mean they should beat SMU. I'd imagine they should beat Boise. So they have the clearest path to the semifinals, but I mean it's crazy because Texas and Penn State both lose their conference championships, and you can argue they ended up getting the two easiest paths.
Yeah, I will say this with Penn State and SMU. I also agree that I think Penn State has the talent advantage. Obviously, I think we both agree there, and we'll give pick'ems later in a different video. But SMU does have a pretty high octane offense. Like they have the ability to strike very quickly. And we've seen at times throughout the regular season, like we've seen real sparks from that Andy Kotelnicki offense that we expected with Drew Aller and Nicholas Singleton and, Tyler Warren. And then we've seen other times, like in the Ohio State game, where it really faltered. And if they get a day when they play SMU that they are not on their A game offensively, like SMU could potentially jump out to an early lead and strike quickly. And, Penn State and James Franklin could find themselves in a difficult spot. I think we
Well,
both agree. Obviously, Penn State's got the talent advantage, but that could be a potential tricky matchup, I think.
yeah, I mean, it's the playoffs. Every team fought their way here.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, there's not necessarily an easy matchup, but there's definitely some paths that are easier than others. So,
Sure.
with that said, yeah, I think for whatever reason, the way things worked out is the two conference losers ended up working out great for them. So they still
Yeah.
have to take care of
Eh,
business, but I'm just saying, like the way that happened, it broke
mhm.
perfectly for them.
For sure.
In a real world, it should be like what it would be SMU against Arizona State, 8-9
Mhm.
seed, and they'd be
Right.
play the winner would be playing Oregon. So
Well, and I mean, look at like right now, we're sitting here saying like it broke perfectly for X seed and or X team and this X team. Like but this is the first year of the 12 team playoff. So like we can sit here and say this year, like making it to your conference championship and losing is super beneficial in terms of where you get seated. But this is the only data point we have right now in terms of the 12 team playoff. So we don't really know if this precedent is going to continue in the following years as we continue on with this 12 team playoff. So it'll be interesting because you can sit back and say like, man, this really benefited the losers of the conference championship team with that 13th data point. Even though they lost, they got very preferential seating.
yeah,
So it's hard to say because this is the first year of the 12 team playoff. Like we don't have anything to compare it against. Like we're going to continue to get more data points as the years go on. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of plays out over the years and kind of what you know if this trend continues or how people end up ultimately scheduling in terms of like difficult opponents, non difficult opponents, to just try and go undefeated and just get it, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
we're going to
yeah.
see a lot of different, I think, outcomes from what even this initial 12 team playoff gave us, in the inaugural 12 team playoff in college football here. So it's really interesting. There's a lot of good matchups. I think the most intriguing one to me personally is that Ohio State Tennessee matchup. I think those are two potentially of like the 5, 6 best teams in all of, in the entire bracket. And I do have a major problem with what Kirk Herbstreit said, during the reveal of the 12 team playoff, where he's like, "Oh, Ohio State would probably be better playing at home because they're going to come out and,
On the
if
road,
they
yeah.
go or on the road rather, excuse me, yeah, and if they come out and they go 3-and-out, like the team's going to get booed, and Ryan Day and this program are going to get, under a lot of scrutiny and all of these things." Like, I think that was a very bad take. I think Ohio State fans and alumni, rightfully so, have a very sour taste in their mouth after that failure for the fourth year in a row against the University of Michigan. But a home game at the shoe, under the lights, it's the night game already confirmed against a huge program like Tennessee. Like that crowd's going to be fired up and they're going to be backing their team. Like obviously they're going to want them to do well, but I think that take was just completely ludicrous. I just wanted to throw that out there because I just think I don't know if that was the former Ohio State player in him coming out a little bit during that reveal where he's got frustrations with Ohio State and the way Ryan Day's, got this team playing over the last several years or what. But I think Ohio State obviously would much prefer to be in the shoe than on the road in Neyland Stadium. So I think that was a
Yeah,
bad take.
I think it's just personal. And
I
from
agree.
everything I've heard, he is a Ryan Day guy, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe he felt like he was defending him in some sense. But
Sure. And
yeah,
I think we're both in agreement. We like
who
Ryan Day as a person.
who doesn't want to be at home in the first ever playoff? Like
Sure.
that's silly.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like I think I think that take was a little bit, you know, like you said, probably personal and just he might have thought like you said, maybe he was defending Ryan Day, where he's like maybe getting out of Columbus and not having all of the pressure and added weight of, you know, not reaching your goals of what is expected in Columbus would maybe help the team be a little bit more loose. But having a home game in the shoe, mid to late December here, I think it's December 21st is when the game is going to be, is just, it's going to be fantastic. I cannot wait to see these home games for some of these programs. Like it's going to be at Happy Valley. We got, at the shoe, like we're going to have some great home environments, in
Yeah.
mid to end December that, we've not had before. So it's going to be great to see. And we'll touch base like we talked about on all of these matchups and kind of give you our picks. And we very, it's going to be interesting because I think we all can look at this and be like, oh, we just expect maybe, Texas is favored over Clemson, and Notre Dame's going to be favored over Indiana, and Penn State's, going to be favored as well in their matchup over SMU. But like, if we've learned anything, if expanding this college football playoff bracket is anything similar to, what we get in, the college basketball NCAA tournament, there will be some upsets. So like you can look at this and be like, this team's more talented and this team's, going to get, is going to have a significant advantage in, X, Y, and Z, aspect of the matchup. And in reality, any of these teams, could come out victorious.
Yeah.
Like, no one would have, like we've touched on this many a times, but like no one would have gone into that Ohio State Michigan game and been like, yeah, Michigan's winning
Yeah.
that game,
And anything can
right?
happen, man.
And they did.
Anything.
Like,
Anything.
it's just
Expect the unexpected.
yeah, and that's why I'm excited. I'm
Yeah.
so excited for this 12 team playoff, because it looks like we have some lopsided matchups here, but in reality, we're probably going to get some really good games, and I hope
Yeah,
we
I
do
think
as
so. I think
college
so.
football fans. So
Yep.
it's gonna be great. And we'll break all these games down like we talked about in another video. And guys, thank you so much as always for listening. Really, really, very much so appreciated. Bella also appreciates it here. And drop a like, a subscription, leave a comment down below on your thoughts on the college football playoff bracket, the way it was seeded, kind of what your guys' thoughts are in the upcoming games. And then we'll catch you guys in the next video and go over everything with these first round matchups.